Hello, aphasia family. It is I, Dr. Lori, and today we are going to talk about some general things about aphasia. Now, each one of these things that I am going to bring up is in and of itself like a whole topic. So this is just going to be like a brief overview, and you'll find more information about each of these things on our website. So the first thing about aphasia that you may not know is roughly 2 million people are thought to have been diagnosed with aphasia. There's not really good numbers about this, but, and I'm not sure if this is just the United States, but people all over the world have aphasia. It's not something just limited to us here in the United States. And more people have aphasia than have multiple sclerosis, ALS, these types of things. And yet you will find that before you had aphasia, you'd probably never heard of it, as most people have not. So that's kind of one of the big shocks when you have had your stroke or your brain injury and you get the diagnosis of aphasia, because you're like, oh, if this is so widespread or kind of there's more people with this than multiple sclerosis, then why doesn't anybody know about it? And that's kind of a common frustration for people once they get diagnosed with aphasia. Something else to know about aphasia is that it does get better over time and with therapy, but it doesn't necessarily go away completely. There may always be some remnants of slowed processing, needing to take longer time, not being able to be in situations where there's a lot of speakers and background noise, but it does get better. Now, depending on where or what part of your brain sustained the brain damage from the stroke or the brain injury or the brain tumor, depends on whether or not you're going to have physical issues. So whether you're going to need a wheelchair or a walker or a cane, or you're just going to be able to walk like you used to, have a little bit of balance issues, something like that. But this is all part of what part of the brain was affected by the stroke. So some people are going to have it, some people aren't. Now, you can improve over time and start with one type of aphasia or one severity of aphasia and end up with a different type of aphasia and different severity. So in the hospital, a lot of people are more severely affected because the stroke just happened, and they may have a global aphasia and have trouble walking or sitting up or eating. Then over time and with therapy, some of that resolves, and they may end up with, instead of global aphasia, an anomic aphasia or a Broca's aphasia. They may start off very severe, where they can barely talk or understand, up to maybe a fluent aphasia or an anomic aphasia type of thing. So it can change over time. That's fairly common. Now, there are a lot of people who are told that 6 months of spontaneous recovery is really all that they're going to get. So they have to cram as much therapy and healing as possible in that 6 months, because then nothing is going to happen after that. And that's not true. That's a very old way of thinking about it. So you may have had a neurologist or a therapist or someone say, hey, well, we're not going to do any more therapy, or I'll just see you next year because you've plateaued. There's nothing new happening here. In the case of therapy, people will say, oh, well, come back in 6 months and we'll see if we can, like, if there's been any improvement, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So the idea that there's a plateau is incorrect. Now, there is a spontaneous recovery period that your brain is healing after the stroke or brain injury, and that's a really good time to make the biggest gains. But sometimes people are still really, really messed up from the stroke in their brain chemistry or in just their fatigue during those 6 months. So don't feel like the 6 months is the end all be all and you're not going to get anything past that. Working at having the intensive aphasia program, we see people who have had their stroke 2 weeks ago to people who've had it 15 years ago, and everybody can make progress. So don't stress out about the 6 month mark, because it's not a true thing. It's not there's no plateau. Now, another thing that is fairly common is because you may have reached this plateau and you may not be involved, or when you get discharged from your different therapies, your neurologist maybe sees you once a year, you kind of have to make your own plan. It's fairly common for people to kind of be left after discharge with like, okay, what do we do next? And you're going to have to do your own research and figure it out. Now, there are a lot of resources online, including the Aphasia Center website that we'll talk about later. But in general, you're going to have to do some research and you're going to have to figure out what the best plan is. Sometimes it's a combination of different types of therapies and approaches in different intensities or increments that really, really work for you. We'll do an article or video on that later of like what some of the options are, save you some time and effort. Another thing is that there are, like I said, lots of different types of aphasia and different severities. So in general, I would recommend not comparing yourself and your aphasia and your progress with someone else's. Because just because this other person looks like they're doing so much better, and you could say, well, hey, I have to use this cane and it takes me like a while to walk around and I can barely say anything, and this person can drive and doesn't have to, has good balance and wow, their speech sounds really good, doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing better than you are. You have to compare yourself to yourself, meaning that compare where you are today with where you were day zero, like in the hospital with the stroke, and I bet you're going to see every day there are big changes happening. It's not useful to compare yourself to somebody else who has a different type of aphasia, different circumstances, different severities, because you don't know what's really happening underneath and what kind of problems they're having. So be in competition with yourself to do better every day. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Another thing is that many families with aphasia, when you're in rehab or you're kind of in your home community, may be the only people you know with aphasia. You may not have met any other people with aphasia, and so it's very isolating and confusing because you don't know what's kind of typical, you don't know what's standard and like what everybody with aphasia has. You think, or we have a lot of people that come here that think like their aphasia and like what they can't do is like really a weird thing, and I'm like, no, everybody has that problem. So it can be kind of isolating and confusing when you don't have any other reference points to be like, oh, okay. Now there are a lot of different organizations. Some people go to even stroke support groups, but there may still not be anybody else with aphasia in there. So again, this is where utilizing different resources and doing some research to connect to other people that have aphasia, to share your experiences, understand what they've gone through, maybe trade some notes as to what's worked and what hasn't worked. Now, one of the things that you can do is, again, this video is going to be connected to an article on our website. So if you go to theaphasiacenter.com and look under resources, you're going to see a whole bunch of articles about aphasia and apraxia, and different things that are probably going to be pretty helpful to you. And now each one of those articles you can download as a PDF for a handout. There's also resources like free communication tip cards that you can read or that you can hand out. There's also an aphasia ID card. So if you're worried about your person with aphasia out and about and getting arrested or running into trouble and not being able to communicate, there's free aphasia ID cards on there in a couple of different languages. So thanks for tuning in to watch today. Again, each of these things that I have brought up is a whole article and video in and of itself. So we'll delve a little bit deeper into these. Hopefully I've given you a decent overview of some of the things that you need to know about aphasia if you're brand new to it, or even if you've had it for a while, there may be things that you don't know about. And again, thank you for watching.